I'm Jim Marshall, the president of the United States Institute of Peace, and it's probably no surprise to anybody in this room that moving presidents around is like herding cats. So it looks like we're going to start just a tad bit later than we planned. My expectation is that we'll be joined by each of our guests, probably as I am speaking in some cases, and then once Ambassador Johnny Carson starts speaking, our guests will come in. All but one are here in the building. The United States Institute of Peace works globally to avoid violent conflict, mitigate it, resolve it. We do so using lots of different techniques. We have geographic expertise, in addition to expertise across a wide range of subject matter issues, whether it's religion and violence, or it's simply training people in dispute resolution, conflict mitigation. We've done an awful lot of training in Africa. We're very involved in Africa, have been, unfortunately. We are typically where states are the most fragile, where conflict is either ending or beginning, and we are doing our best to try to help parties settle conflict without using violence. Conflict in our society, conflict in the world is inevitable. It will always exist. There will always be differences of opinion, different views, etc. But conflict that leads to violence is the specific thing that we work on here at the Institute of Peace. Fitz, could you see if Ambassador Carson could come in? If somebody could get Ambassador Carson. I want to welcome you all. Glad you're here. We've got overflow crowds elsewhere. This is being televised, and as I say, moving presidents around is like herding cats. I'm a former member of Congress, so I have a great appreciation of how legislators tend not to pay too much attention to people who are trying to organize their lives. As I look expectantly at the door in hopes that somebody will come in. While we're waiting, let me just introduce Ambassador Johnny Carson. He's not in the room right now, but he will be shortly, and he is going to be our moderator. And let me describe to you his background. I guess he doesn't need to hear it. He probably already knows it. Ambassador Johnny Carson was sworn in as Assistant Secretary of State for the Bureau of African Affairs on May 7th, 2009. Prior to this, he was the National Intelligence Officer for Africa at the NIC, after serving as the Senior Vice President of the National Defense University in Washington. Ambassador Carson's 37-year Foreign Service career includes ambassadorships to Zimbabwe and Uganda, Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Bureau of African Affairs. Earlier in his career, he had assignments in Portugal, Botswana, Mozambique, and Nigeria. He has also served as desk officer in the Africa section at State's Bureau of Intelligence and Research, State Officer for the Secretary of State, and Staff Director for the Africa Subcommittee of the United States House of Representatives. Before joining the Foreign Service, Ambassador Carson was a Peace Corps volunteer in Tanzania. From 1965 to 1968, he has a Bachelor of Arts in History and Political Science from Drake University and a Master of Arts in International Relations from the School of Oriental and Africa Studies at the University of London. Ambassador Carson is the recipient of several Superior Honor Awards from the State Department and a Meritorious Service Award from the Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright. The Centers for Disease Control presented Ambassador Carson its highest award, Champion of Prevention Award, for his leadership in directing the United States government's HIV/AIDS prevention efforts in Kenya. We're particularly pleased to have Ambassador Carson with us today. This is his last day with the State Department, and many of you are his close personal friends. I think we owe him a round of applause. I have a personal debt to Ambassador Carson, but for the fact that he is moderating I would be moderating. So let me turn it over to Ambassador Carson for a few words while I try and round up our cats and get them in the room.
I think they're.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you. I think they're.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I want to start by thanking President Jim Marshall for his very kind introduction, and also the United States Institute of Peace for hosting this very important event this morning. There are a number of distinguished guests in the audience this morning. I will not attempt to identify you all by name, but I welcome you all with great pleasure to this important gathering. The United States Institute for Peace has long been a center of excellence for preventing and mitigating international conflict. The Institute's work in the Sudans, its partnership with the State Department's African Peacekeeping Training Program, and its contributions to Africa are significant, and I would like to acknowledge them this morning. As President Obama said in front of Ghana's parliament in 2009, and I quote, "Good governance is the ingredient that can unlock Africa's enormous potential." Democracy and good governance not only create free, just, and more stable societies, they also create the conditions for sustainable, broad-based economic growth and development. That is why building strong partnerships to support democracy and good governance has been our top priority in Africa, as well as a key pillar of President Obama's U.S. strategy toward sub-Saharan Africa. As we all know, democracy and good governance are about much more than just holding elections. What happens before and after elections is equally, if not more, important. That is why capable, reliable, and transparent institutions are key to success. Strong parliaments, the rule of law, protections for human rights, independent judiciaries, free presses, and vibrant civil societies and private sectors protect democracy and good governance from those who might weaken or trample upon it. All four of our very distinguished and honored guests here today, President Koroma of Sierra Leone, President Sall, who we expect shortly, President Banda of Malawi, and the Prime Minister of Cape Verde, Prime Minister José Neves, are here because of the contributions that they and their governments have made to strengthen democratic institutions in their respective countries. Their decisions have contributed to significant economic development and security gains in their countries, and also in their respective regions. Last year, Sierra Leone had held free, fair, and creditable elections in which nearly 90% of the registered voters participated peacefully. These elections, Sierra Leone's third since the end of its decade-long civil war in 2002, awarded President Koroma a second term to continue implementing his agenda for prosperity. Sierra Leone's economy is expanding rapidly as a result of President Koroma's leadership. President Macky Sall, who will be joining us shortly, participated in elections in his own country 1 year ago. Senegal 1 year ago was facing a period of instability and economic contraction. President Sall has made a number of political and economic reforms since being in office, and the Senegalese government now is launching efforts to end the long-simmering conflict in the Casamance region. Under President Sall's leadership, Senegal's economy is expected to grow by nearly 5% this year. President Banda, who took over in Malawi nearly 1 year ago, and with her government, immediately moved to implement tough but necessary political and economic reforms. Together, they devalued Malawi's currency, removed price controls for fuel, and cut government expenses. In her first 100 days in office, President Banda has turned Malawi around. As a result, the country's economy is expected to grow twice as fast this year than in the previous year. And last but certainly not least, Cape Verde has risen from the bottom of many development indicators because of the visionary leadership of Prime Minister Neves. The country's vibrant two-party political system, its strong rule of law and low corruption also have contributed to Cape Verde having one of Africa's highest literacy rates, best in foreign investment environments, and consistently high economic growth. At every step of the way, the United States government has partnered with all four leaders in all four countries as they have implemented their reforms. Because each country has demonstrated serious commitment, our Millennium Challenge Corporation has compacts in place with Malawi, Senegal, and Cape Verde. And I might note that Cape Verde was one of the first 3 countries to receive an MCC compact, and it was the first country to complete its compact successfully, and it was the first country to get a second compact. All of these leaders are focusing on tackling the most significant impediments to development in their countries. And the MCC has selected Sierra Leone as eligible to develop a compact. Again, thanks to the leadership of President Koroma. The United States is committed to continuing its strong partnership with leaders and countries committed to democracy, respect for human rights, the full inclusion of women in society, economics, and politics, as well as religious and press freedoms. President Sall, welcome.
Please.
I am going to stop here since we have a very full program and not a great deal of time. I would like to turn the microphone over first to President Koroma and then to our other two presidents and one prime minister who are here with us today. I will ask that each of you try to keep your remarks to no more than 5 minutes so that we have ample time for questions from our audience here as well as in our overflow rooms as well as those who are following us on social media. And for everyone in the audience, please keep writing your questions on the 3x5 index cards that we have passed out and hand them to a USIP or State Department staff member who is near the aisles. I'll start by asking each of our speakers in turn to address the following broad question. How does democracy and strengthening of democratic institutions in your countries contribute to economic development and growth and a more equitable society? But I will give our leaders 5 minutes to talk about their countries, talk about what they are doing in terms of democracy and economic growth, and then we will proceed to a more informal dialogue and discussion. President Koroma, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Ambassador Carson. Let me use this opportunity to thank the President of the Institute of Peace of the United States. We are happy that you have invited us this morning, and let me use this opportunity to also thank the Institute and America for the role they have played in restoring peace in Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone has a unique story in terms of peace and peace development because as a country we have experienced peace after independence, and then we went into a period of civil conflict, and thereafter we are now building on our democracy and developing the country again. The story of the conflict in Sierra Leone is an open book. We will normally want to just move forward because we all know it, and what we take pride in is the fact that we have committed ourselves to moving forward. What we take pride in is the fact that Sierra Leone is an example of a country that has emerged from peace and have quickly restored order, and we are now developing the country. Now, for us to get to the point where we are today, the war was formally declared over in 2002, and since then, the country took the appropriate steps that have not only ended the war, have not only built on peace, but we have now positioned ourselves to development. Now, on issues like these, we took the first steps of establishing a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which was geared towards ensuring that the communities and the people within the country are reconciled, because it's important for a country that has been through war to be a reconciled country, a reconciled community, to move forward. Following that, we also established the TRC, which was a committee charged with the responsibility to take on those that have the highest responsibility for the crimes of the war. And some of it was organized in the country, and of course we had the outcome of what happened in The Hague with Charles Taylor. But these are all institutions that we have put together to end the war and reconcile ourselves. Now, in moving forward, in building the peace, building the democracy and development, we had taken steps to put in place institutions that will ensure that we move forward in a manner of peace, in a manner in which democracy will be observed, and in a manner in which inclusiveness will be guaranteed in the society. Now, this led us to the establishment of institutions of good governance. We have established the Political Party Registration Commission that is charged with the responsibility of observing and monitoring activities of political parties. We have the National Commission for Democracy. This is also an institution that is set up to ensure that we sensitize people and get them involved in the democratic process. We also have the institution of monitoring and maintaining the independence of the media, the IMC. The National Electoral Commission was also an institution that has been established. We have a good number of these institutions that are established to guarantee good governance in the country. And in the process, we have reviewed the security infrastructure in the country. The police and the military went through a security sector review process that has transformed them from security forces that are not democratic, and they are now security forces that are democratic and respect the Constitution. Now, these are all institutions that we have tried to reform, of course, including the judiciary. The role of the judiciary is very important to us. We believe that when the judiciary becomes independent and professional, it will play the role in which everybody will feel protected and people outside will also feel protected. So we've created these institutions to ensure that democracy is guaranteed, the human rights of individuals are guaranteed. And I must say that they have come a long way in trying to conduct their affairs, to the extent that our Human Rights Commission has been granted an A status last year because of the effectiveness that they have carried. We have also been through a situation in which, because of the human rights record of the Commission and also the political commitments as a government and as a leader we have provided, which has made it possible for journalists to express their writing. There's a freedom of speech, and there has been no moment, even after the war, when we had anybody being incarcerated for expressing a political opinion. So we have an impeccable human rights record. These are great achievements that have laid the basis for democratic governance. Now, within it, as a government, we thought that we have to create an enabling environment for investment to come in. And we have effected a lot of changes of our laws, a lot of strengthening of institutions, and a lot of adoption of fiscal measures that have given signals out that we are sanitizing the economy and we are preparing it for adequate investment. And this has been recognized by the World Bank that have positioned us as one of the 10 top performers in the world in terms of, we have also in the process attracted investments in the regions of hundreds and millions of dollars. These investments are now impacting on changing the agriculture and mining sectors. So a lot of things are going on that clearly indicates that there is a need for us to continue with the democratic process. And when there is democracy and stability, it will open up investment opportunities. And that is where we are as a nation. That is why we now believe that Sierra Leone is no longer a country of blood diamonds that is known for in the past. Sierra Leone is now an investment destination. Sierra Leone is the place to do business. This has been recognized by the World Bank, the IMF. Last year, our economy was referred to as the hottest economy and a place to do investment. And we registered a very high rate of growth that is not comparable to any other African country. This is as a result of the measures that we have taken, the democracy that we are building, the openness of our economy, and the structures that we are putting in place to guarantee that investment is not only attracted, but it is also protected. And it is also seen in the lives of the people. More employment, better conditions of service, and I believe that Sierra Leone is on the move. So let me, Mr. Ambassador, stop at this point and maybe react as we move on.
Absolutely. President Koroma, thank you for those very rich thoughts, and we will come back to some of the issues that you've pointed to. Let me next turn to our president from Malawi. We'll start with President Banda.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Ambassador Carson, distinguished panelists who are also distinguished presidents and Prime Minister of Africa. Allow me to take this opportunity to thank President Obama and, of course, the Institute for organizing this event, but more especially for President Obama to invite African leaders that he feels have done a lot in putting in place institutions that have brought about pure and proper democracy that has also encouraged private sector and wealth creation and growth. Allow me to talk about Malawi before I became president. In 2009, I stood for elections with the president of Malawi as his running mate. I didn't realize at the time of elections that he was using me to get the female vote, because I had spent 30 years of my life working with women at grassroots. So I had that platform to bring to the table. 2 weeks into office, I realized that he hadn't been genuine, that he wanted his brother to take over from him. What that did is that in the next 3 years, it was about the succession process to ensure that the brother takes over. As a result, as a nation, we diverted from the development agenda and focused on that succession. By 2012, last year, the economy had collapsed. There was no fuel in the country, there was no forex. The economy had gone on the black market. People were sleeping at the filling station. There was no food, there was no drugs in the hospital. I had been completely sidelined. In fact, I had been expelled from his party. And I had formed my own party, but the Constitution did not allow him to sack me. He tried twice. But another thing that I learned is that true leadership is a love affair between you and the people. And for 30 years, you must fall in love with the people and the people must fall in love with you. When that happens, nobody can break that relationship. And so for 30 years, I had worked with the people and he miserably failed to get the people away from me. So that's what I had in 2012, by the time he passed away. And Malawians decided that the Constitution must be respected. The Constitution was very clear. The Vice President was supposed to take over when the President dies or becomes incapacitated. I'm starting from there so that you can understand that by the time I got into office, the collapsed economy and all what was going on, I was not aware. I had not been party to it. But I must also take this opportunity to thank American people, because in March of 2012, I was invited to a conference in South Africa, organized by serving and retired Army military generals. Sir General Richard Myers was at that meeting. I was meeting him for the first time. Sir David Richards of UK was there, the general from Sierra Leone. These distinguished men and women were meeting to discuss Africa's conflict areas, post-conflict reconstruction and reconciliation. And they invited me to go and chair the DRC case study. I didn't realize that in 5 weeks, my general, who was also attending that meeting, would be deciding my fate. And I will forever be grateful to Ambassador Carson and all those who worked so hard in 48 hours to make sure that the Constitution is respected and I'm allowed to take oath and become president of my country. In the past year, what we have done is to get back on track, because by the time I became president, we were off track with IMF. And so we had to go very quickly, go back to IMF, get back on track, strengthen governance institutions, make sure that we get the letter of comfort that we required in order for other donors to come back, including the UK, that had cut our relationship with Malawi. In 100 days, we were able to get the letter of comfort. We were able to begin to get our donors to get back. We improved our relations with our neighbors. We restored our relationship with the United Kingdom. We also had to do several things as Malawi government. One was to repeal all the laws that we felt were controversial and were against human rights and good governance. So in July of last year, I organized what I called the National Dialogue on the Economy. At this conference, we chose 5 sectors, namely mining, energy, tourism, infrastructure, and agriculture. Those projects were chosen, those sectors were chosen because of the potential they have to create wealth. Within each sector, out of the 5 sectors, we have also chosen 3 projects. At the end of 2013, we must face Malawians with 3 projects for each of those sectors. I want you, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, to know that I, in 14 days, on 14 months, are implementing a very, very unpopular reform program. In any normal situation, I should have given up and backtracked. Why? Because I must win the elections next year. But I am committed to stay the course. I'm committed to stay the course because it's the right thing to do. And even if it ends up costing me the elections next year, that's okay, that's fine. We also have implemented social programs with the help of the IMF to make sure that we cushion the shock of the devaluation of 49% that we were forced to implement last year in order to bring our economy back on track. It also meant introducing austerity measures, including selling the presidential jet and reducing my own salary by 30%. Poverty eradication is a top on my agenda, and we believe that we will only begin to change the situation of Malawians when we begin to help Malawians create jobs and create wealth. So we are talking about a private sector-led economy. I also introduced 2 presidential initiatives, one, poverty and hunger reduction, where we are mobilizing women and youth to grow crops that have export potential. In other ways, diversifying from the traditional growing of maize for survival. I also insist that women and youth must get support. I am talking about, yes, creating wealth, creating jobs, but also ensuring that women and youth have special opportunities. And having worked at grassroots for 30 years, what has become very clear to me is that the situation of women and children in Africa is only going to change if we address issues of income at household level. And helping women and youth to have an income is critical and is a must. We don't even have a choice. Because when you talk about population growth, maternal mortality, lack of education for the girl child, at the center of all that is poverty. And until and unless we assist women and youth get income at household level for the poor, the situation of women and children, our economies in Africa will never change. I have worked with women and children for 30 years. And I know that for me, that's the only way we can improve the life of people in Africa. Malawi is expecting a bumper harvest this year. Malawians have worked extremely hard to diversify their economy. And even for the legumes that they have grown, we're expecting a bumper harvest. We are encouraging investors to come and invest in agriculture, in energy, in mining, and in tourism. But agriculture is the easiest for Malawians to enter. Malawi is a success story because in the past year, with all the efforts that we have made, we are expected to grow by 5%, our economy. We have reduced maternal mortality from 675 to 470. We have 7,000 adult classes going on at the moment. We have improved our position according to the Mo Ibrahim Index. Madam Selif and I are working hard to improve the lives of women. We have started a very strong exchange program. A month ago, she sent a delegation from Liberia who came to Malawi, and we sent a delegation to Liberia from Malawi. I believe that together in Africa, we are ready to help to assist our people, but we also calling upon investors from the US to come to Africa. The best thing that has happened to me during this trip is now hearing President Obama and hearing Mr. Shah of USAID yesterday saying what I've been trying for 30 years, that it is only when we assist our people in the continent of Africa to do business, to have an income at household level, that's the only way we are going to eradicate poverty on that continent. Thank you very much for your attention.
President Banda, thank you very, very much for those excellent remarks. I would now like to call on our third president, President Macky Sall, for his comments.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Carson. First of all, I would like to express my apologies for being late. In fact, we are talking about democracy, and democracy assumes the sovereignty of the people. Yesterday, after our dinner, the people of Senegal, people from Senegal in the United States, from all states, wished to meet with me, and therefore I had to spend some time, and actually I was with them until 4 in the morning, and that gave me very little time to come here, so I would like to extend my apologies. Ladies and gentlemen, I am the president of a small country by its size. We have 12 million citizens in my country, but we are an African country which has provided a great contribution to universal democracy. Senegal indeed has experienced in 1786 a date when fundamental important things occurred in this country. In 1786, in 1787, we had a very important revolution in the north of the country, which allowed us to rid ourselves of a traditional yoke, a traditional power, in order to consolidate a governance based not on birth, but based around the choice of the various components of the population at the time. And specifications were made up at the time, and we said we need to choose our leader, North Mali at the time, based on these standards, your knowledge, your various standards of leadership. And this was already codified in 1786, 1787. In 1860, long after these events, which lasted more than a century, at the time when Senegal was still a colony, voting already started in Saint-Louis in Senegal already in 1860, which means that a democratic process is neither the impetus of a single president, neither caused by a party. Actually, it's the legacy of a very long process that took many years. Senegal, already in 1914, sent its first black member of parliament to the French parliament. It was Député Blaise Diarra, and he was followed by other members of parliament, Mr. Diouf, Léopold Sédar Senghor, up until the time of our independence in 1960. So it is this legacy that allowed us to have a stable regime since 1960. We have never experienced variations or coups, and this, in spite of political crises such as the one that we had last year, we nonetheless remain on the right track, and we have understood that democracy is everybody's business, that democracy assumes free and transparent elections, and you must be held at specific deadlines. You must abide by the timeline, you must by the principles, the procedures, and you cannot change the rules of the game during the game. Because if during a soccer game you change the rules of the game, well, you can imagine that the game will be of no longer much interest. And this, unfortunately, this almost is what happened to us last year. So I'm talking about this, during this little deviation, the rules of the game were changed, whereas ECOWAS established in the additional protocol that 6 months prior to an election, you cannot modify the rules of the electoral law. So I am the inheritor of this tradition. I'm very proud of it because I do know that as President of the Republic, there are some things that I cannot do myself. And the example is that we have a true democracy, standing institutions, and I fought against the former president who for 12 years was my boss. I was his minister, his prime minister. I was Speaker of Parliament, coming from his own majority. We had a dispute. I left him, I founded my own party, and I defeated him clearly, transparently, democratically. And I came into office 5 days between the vote of the runoff and my swearing of office. A country that does not have solid institutions cannot do that. So Senegal has a democracy that has to be mentioned. We've always had strong institutions. The power has control over these institutions. You cannot choose the rules of the game, and that is what institutions are. Good governance. Good governance assumes the principle of accountability. Therefore, you have to be held accountable, which means that those who are responsible of the public office, they have to, everything that they do is accountable, and therefore we have we'd like to congratulate President Banda because I myself have a Boeing 727 that I'm putting out for sale because actually it's on for sale for 1 year now, but no one seems to be interested in buying it. It might have to be given to a museum. We had 2 aircraft, but Senegal does not need 2 presidential aircraft. This is to say that I told all these perks for the ministers and senior officials are no longer there. We're trying to improve AGOA. We're seeking to invest private investments at the international level. We're trying to strengthen the rule of law, to have an independent justice system. And because in all of our countries, you have to say things as they are. And even in many developed countries, corruption is a fact. Therefore, we must constantly work to reduce corruption down to a level that will be almost insignificant. And that is not easy because there's traditions. And as long as we do not have the rule of law, as long as we don't have accountability, it will be very hard to fight corruption. But we're not losing hope, and I am convinced. I'll stop here because don't want to go beyond the time that was given to me. But on behalf, General, I am in favor of a reduction of the term of office of the president from 7 years to 5 years. And I'd like to tell you, Africa today is a continent on the march. The Africa of 2013 has nothing to do with the cliches that are often expressed to talk about civil wars, where you talk about coups. But bear in mind, you had your own wars. You had the Civil War. There were wars in Europe up until 1945. People fought each other in Europe. Africa has just become independent for the most case since 1960. So it is normal that should be conflicts remaining here and there. And we've had composite borders that were created by the colonialists. So in terms of the overall dynamic of the continent, we are moving towards prosperity, moving towards democracy. And it's this message of hope that I would like to convey today at the USIP, to tell the Americans, please come more onto the continent. It's the cradle of mankind. It's a magical continent in terms of its diversity, in terms of its natural resources, in terms of its men and its women. Africa is really worth seeing. And Dakar is just 6 hours by plane from here.
Mr. President, thank you very much for those very spirited and very, very clear remarks. Let me now turn to our last speaker in the first round and invite the Prime Minister of Cape Verde, Prime Minister Neves, to address us now.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I wanted to start by thanking the Peace Institute for the invitation and for organizing this meeting. So this is the Peace Institute, the Institute of Peace of the United States. Therefore, I would like to start by saying that in order to have development, it is essential that there be peace and stability. And it is essential also to have democracy in the country. There is no development without stability. There's no development without democracy. That being said, I think that the most important thing that we can do for Africa is to build capable governments, capable states, states that can guarantee democracy and stability. A state capable of managing plurality, political plurality, social plurality, a state that can manage conflict, and states in Africa that could face the risks that are now presented in the continent and the risks that the whole of humanity runs. I'm thinking about environmental risks, for instance. They are very important and very large. But in Africa, we're also facing very serious social risks. For instance, I'm thinking about an explosion on the part of the youth if we don't give them opportunities for the future. We need to train the young people for work so that they can have a better life in the future. So I think that we need governments in Africa that can develop a clear vision of development. And states and governments that can develop strategies that will allow to implement this vision for development, to define a development agenda with very clear goals, with strategies well defined, and with clear paths to undertake. Martha Sen, the Nobel Prize for Economy, development is freedom. In other words, when we'll have a higher level of development, we'll reach a higher level of freedom and liberty, and we will be in a position to consolidate democracy for good. Another important factor for peace and stability in the future is, of course, good governance. Good governance, of course, implies free and transparent elections, respect for the rules of the game, the democratic game there is, respect for minorities. It's essential to respect minorities and to respect the opposition. The opposition must find its position in the political game, and the opposition must also play a role in the political definition of the situation in the country. And also, the government must be in a position to respond to the demands and the aspirations of the population. Serious administration that looks toward providing services for the citizenry as well as the business community. And if we are able to do that, we will have certainly created spaces that will take into account the plurality and the diversity of our societies and use that in order to put together very strong development agendas, and in so doing also reach or put in place legitimate governments whose legitimacy will be, of course, defined by their own performance. Governments that will defend the rule of law, democracy, which are all very important factors for peace and stability. But to conclude, if you allow me, I would like to say that Africa is the continent of the future. Africa can only claim to be the continent of the future because it has a very rich past. It has enormous talent, enormous capabilities, and all we need to do is to really gather all this capacity, all this capability, all this talent, and make it work towards the development of Africa, to use all our very abundant resources in the service of the dignity for all Africans. And I think that Presidents Macky Sall, Koroma, President Banda are leaders that show that there is a positive Africa, there is an ambitious Africa out there, there is Africa who wants democracy, peace, stability, and Africa that wants, above all, a certain level of development to ensure dignity in the future for all Africans, men and women. Thank you very much.
Mr. Prime Minister, very inspired remarks, and we'll come back to those. We've received a number of very, very good questions from our audience. And I'd like very much to involve them in the dialogue that we're having here this morning. I will ask all of you to respond briefly to these questions. The first one is a combination of two questions from the audience. And one is, how do you keep your democratic progress on track? And what are the challenges to doing that? And the second one is also in the same way. It says, congratulations on your economies being among the fastest growing in the world. What measures are you taking to keep this good news moving forward? In other words, what are you doing to ensure that your economies will continue to grow and that your democracies will remain vibrant and alive? I'll start with perhaps with President Banda. Is that okay?
I'm not ready. Yeah. Yeah. What I have done in Malawi to remain accountable and transparent to the people of Malawi is to set up in my office what I'm calling the projects implementation unit as a tool, as a center for to interface with the public. They can call upon us and find out what progress we're making and how implementation is taking place. Number two is I have set up a program where I interact with opposition parties. I invite them to State House and discuss matters of state, rise above politics, and just focus on issues that are of great importance to the people of Malawi. I do the same with the civil society. I do the same with the media, and I do the same with the faith community. Thank you.
Okay. Could I ask President Macky Sall?
Merci beaucoup, Johnny.
Thank you, Johnny. Well, I think that in order to maintain a democratic standard, my country must be able to continue to have a constant democratic watchdogs, because the democracy does remain fragile in light of the exceptional events that occurred. Our democracy was challenged. There has to be some monitoring of a democracy. We are a country that is still free and independent, but it's thanks to our justice system, which asserted its independence. It took the right decisions. You have to have political actors who accept free and competition. They also have to accept the outcome of elections. The rules of the game have to be clear and transparent for all. We must also, I believe, to ensure that democracy sustain itself, we must be fair, equitable in the distribution of wealth. To do so, we need to have a growth that would be inclusive, whereby growth is reflected throughout society, and we can give greater opportunities to each and every one, allowing them to progress thanks to their own efforts and to improve their lives. That is a fundamental element, and I'm trying to various social programs. We have universal health care, and we have also special family plans to give hope back to those citizens who are the weakest among us, and to allow other people to truly develop themselves, to create wealth. So it's a scale, a balance that you must work with, and this is what I believe to be a fact. Je vous remercie.
Prime Minister Neves?
Well, you know, I think that in order to ensure continuity of a democratic state, democratic rule, that it's fundamental that we consider three different aspects. First, to respect scrupulously the rules of the game. Second, to build consensus as regards the principal national issues. And in order to build consensus, you have to have a prior strong political dialogue, bringing together the principal political parties, the principal political actors, as well as strengthen social dialogue with the different social actors, the unions, management, businesses, to build a minimal consensus on the important social issues of the day, the economic agenda, and principally the creation of an environment that is seen as favorable by all for foreign investment and the growth of the economy. The third most important dimension has to do with the carrying out of government rule. Governments become legitimate day by day to the degree that governments are able to provide answers to social needs. They create channels, new channels of interaction with different aspects of society, coming up with a strong civil society, ensuring that civil society have full room to grow and affirm itself. As to development per se and economic growth per se, the most important there would be to create factors of continuity, to create a favorable environment for business and create opportunities so that these businesses be carried out through strong investments from the private sector.
Thank you. For me, maintaining democracy is all about a strict adherence to the rule of law. Like I mentioned, our society went through difficulties, and for us to build a democratic process, we have to create the institutions. And what is required now is a situation wherein you have very strong institutions that will regulate the whole democratic process. We have institutions for the human rights, institutions for democracy. We have the judiciary, and we have many other institutions. When these institutions are strengthened and capacitated and allowed a space to run on their own without political interference, I think with that pattern, you will be able to ensure that the whole society is regulated. It's not just about people in governance providing leadership. It is about the protection of the rights of the individuals. It is about protecting the minority groups. It is about securing the vulnerable groups. And when you have in the country institutions that are capacitated to address this issue, I think sustenance of democracy is ensuring that these institutions are given space to operate, and government allows them to operate, and there is a complete separation of powers with the institutions of governance. Now, in sustaining the economy also, I believe that it has to be an ongoing process. Now, we have tried to adhere to the review of our laws, creating mechanisms wherein it become interesting for investors to come in and invest. That has to be sustained. That is why I very much like the system of the MCC. I mean, you qualify for a compact. For you to stay, you have to ensure that you meet the parameters that are expected of you on a continuous basis. And by doing that, you will be able to sustain the democracy. You'll be able to ensure that you have an opportunity to improve on what you have done to guarantee the status where you are. So it's a question of just continuing to do what is right, improving on it, and allowing the institutions to grow and become very strong in our respective democracies.
No, thank you very much. democratic institutions clearly are a vital ingredient to any strong, stable, and vibrant democracy. But every good democracy is underpinned by a vibrant civil society. A civil society capable of speaking out, civil society capable of organizing, of participating, and being felt that it is being heard. Let me ask a question in this regard from one of our audience members. And this person says, what is your response to leaders in Africa who have become skeptical and hostile to foreign funding of civil society organizations? And how do you, in fact, treat and respect your own civil societies? I'll start with President Macky Sall.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Carson. In Senegal, we have a very dynamic civil society. And that civil society has played a major role in consolidating our democracy. It has done a lot in political terms to ensure that elections are free. And civil society in our country is very active in promoting human rights. There are various national human rights organizations which work not only within Senegal, but within neighboring countries as well, within ECOWAS countries. Civil society in our country is very involved in conflict resolution and peace, notably in the Casamance region. So we have very dynamic civil society organizations. We also have a lot of civil society organizations that work on religious issues. These religious civil society organizations have a lot of freedom to do what they want, and we can look at. You have to look closely at where they get their funding. You have to make sure that funding provided to a lot of these religious CSOs isn't diverted into illegal activities, for example, terrorism. You have to look very closely at the funding that these organizations receive, but we give a great deal of freedom and a great deal of leeway to civil society organizations in our country. They're active across the entire country, and we have no particular objections to foreign funding for NGOs and civil society organizations in Senegal, as long as all this is done according to national legislation, as long as no laws are violated. Senegal has no problem with foreign funding of NGOs.
Prime Minister Neves.
You know, we think that development of the host of differing African countries ultimately will be through a competitive integration of all those countries working together in the long run. Now, obviously, there are some countries that are in a process of transition, that there's a certain distrust regarding unknown investors. But I think that gradually, continent-wide, we're creating spaces where first work be carried forth in each country to create an ever more favorable environment for business and investment, the creation of new opportunities for firms interested in doing business in our countries, as well as I say, creating the necessary conditions to go out and attract foreign capital. We're hoping that this investment ultimately, hopefully, be for the true development of the countries at hand. In Cape Verde, we have a national investment law that favors the attraction of private investments, as well as a fiscal incentives policy and law to create greater incentives for those that wish to take advantage of Cape Verdean investments, as well as working to create competitive sectors so that firms can invest, that they can be more competitive, and do business and make profits for themselves. Investors can satisfy their own stockholders.
Thank you very much. I personally believe that the civil society play a very important role in the entire democratic process. I believe they should be partners with government in the furtherance of the efforts of developing the specific sectors that they represent. We have no problems with the operations of civil society. I think the difficulty is when you are faced with a situation wherein you cannot clearly define the role of the civil society. What are the objectives that they are trying to achieve? A professional civil society that becomes an advocate for the voiceless, representing the other side of the views that are not normally visible from a government point of view is acceptable. But when civil society gets to the point of putting out negatives only to attract foreign attention and foreign funding, I think it is counterproductive. But I believe strongly that the civil society should be part of an effective governance system. So with that, we are open, and I consider them as partners in development.
Thank you. President Banda?
Thank you very much indeed. In Malawi, civil society provides checks and balances. They are partners in any democracy. And I myself came from the civil society. So I'm a product of the civil society. I look upon them as partners. When there is a fight between the civil society and government, it only confuses the ordinary people, the voiceless that we are all supposed to serve. In Malawi, they are involved in voter education. They are involved in safeguarding the rights of disadvantaged people. And any leader that is a Democrat should take advantage of the issues they raise in order to serve the people better. Right now, they're enjoying total freedom, but I've always said that the civil society in Malawi and the international NGOs that come to work in Malawi have to forge partnerships. They have to work in partnership because it is the local people, the indigenous NGOs, the civil society in Malawi that are better able to understand the issues that affect ordinary people. And when they forge partnerships, they are better able to yield more for the benefit of ordinary people. It really breaks my heart when the international community come in, international NGOs come in and think that they can do it alone and ignore the indigenous people. We in Africa, we know exactly what to do. We know how to get from point A to point B. We know how to get our people out of desperate situations, or out of poverty, or whatever issues we want to raise. And it breaks my heart when international NGOs come in Africa with abundant resources at their disposal. But they just waste those resources, but they don't know where to start from. They don't know what to do. When they go into partnership with the ordinary people, local indigenous NGOs, then they are better, then they are able to achieve more when they work on the ground. Yeah.
President Banda, thank you very much for those remarks. Two groups in Africa that are essential to Africa's well-being and future are sometimes neglected and overlooked. We've gotten several questions from the audience that ask in many African countries, African youth comprise the majority of the population. In many African countries, women are over 50% of the population. What are you doing to ensure that the youth of your countries are going to turn out to be the future leaders of your country, who are going to continue to support democracy and strong economic development? What are you doing to ensure the inclusivity of women in all of your activities in your countries? And we'll start, if we could, this time around with Prime Minister Neves.
These are two of the more interesting matters that can possibly be discussed. First, let's look at youth. I think that fundamentally we have to invest in their training and education. If you invest in education, that in every sense is fundamental to be able to provide any type of response to the needs and desires of the youth. Basic education, secondary education, university training, and professional and technical training. Whatever type of training and education, invest heavily in that to create conditions where they have the possibilities to be employed once graduated, and to create the necessary conditions to support their entrepreneurial spirit, that they have spirit and that they have space to build a business, that they can set up their own terms of employment, create their own businesses. We can create incubators within firms, as it were, but also conditions permitting them to be hired, promoted, that they too have benefit from tax incentives. We already have many youths creating their own small businesses, where for the first 3 years they are able to operate tax-free, and we also further measures where the youth can have greater access, easier access to all levels of education. In the last few years, 2% of our full GDP budget in education, we suddenly rose to 22%, which is one of the highest rates of spending on education throughout the African continent. Now, in terms of women, well, women undoubtedly represent the future of humanity, period. And so, and therefore, it's fundamental to invest in the equality and equity that they deserve. And to give you examples, I have budgets that include gender questions, gender evaluation, because typically poverty is more frequent in female quarters. We have to reduce at all costs the inequalities in the distribution of power and the distribution of wealth, and we in Cape Verde have created an Equality Institute, or a Gender Equality and Equity Institute, to promote even greater equality between men and women. And I need to tell you that it used to be said that behind every great man there's a great woman. We need to now say that beside every great man there's a great woman. And that's the line that we wish to further in the future, creating many opportunities. And to give an example, even at the level of government, at a given point in time, and even to this day, we have full parity amongst all our ministers. In 15 ministers, we have 8 women ministers. And these are in important and essential portfolios for government maintenance, so that they can participate fully in the governance of the country. And this is not really a question of just numbers, but we support business entrepreneurial spirit by women, education for women, to support women in the creation of small businesses, their own businesses. And lastly, to combat a question which has been fundamental throughout, and that's violence against women. Unfortunately, in Africa, we're well aware of the fact that this problem still exists, and we have to do everything possible, everything within our power to combat domestic violence, to combat gender-based violence, and we approved, with the support of the United States government, and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton gave us immense support in this regard. We were able to approve a law against gender-based violence, which is having immediate and great results throughout Cape Verde. And let me wind up. These are very deep questions. I maybe have gone on too much, but they're two issues that are very deep personal interest to me. But let me say that we have to have a full commitment by African leadership in terms of opportunities, greater opportunities to be given to youth in the future, and the equality, and gender equality and equity, to give ever greater opportunities to women. Only in a society where equals coexist can there be people that are free. Only in a free society, with a society with free people, can there be greater equality. Thank you very much.
Mr. President.
On the issue of the youths, as a government, we have taken it up very seriously, because over the period, the youths were the most affected during the war and others, and therefore in trying to rehabilitate the country and move the country forward, we must pay attention on the youths. That is why we have established a National Youth Commission that is charged with the responsibility of coordinating all the youth activities as we engage them. Additionally, recently I have created a Ministry of Youths to really focus on activities of the youths. And we consider the youth factor so important, and personally I have committed my second term to developing the youths, ensuring that they are capacitated, they are empowered with what it takes for them to realize the benefits of the new opportunities that are emerging in the country. Now, we have also involved a good number of them in position of trust. I have youths serving as full-time ministers in my government and deputy ministers. It's given them an opportunity to be exposed to leadership. So it's not about leaders of tomorrow. They are already involved in the leadership process of today. And on the issue of the women, is also very important. They constitute the majority of our population. And of course, we have unique complexities and backgrounds. Most of it is customary and otherwise. But to address the issues, to empower the women, to ensure that we position them alongside with men, we have enacted the gender acts that have ensured that the issues of inheritance, the issues of marriage regularize. We have also enacted a Sexual Offences Act that makes any act, a sexual act against a woman, a crime against the state. And we have also given women positions that have not been provided them in the past. The Chief Justice of the country is a woman. The Solicitor General is a woman. The Commissioner General for the Revenue Authority is a woman, and you have a host of them. They dominate the Supreme Court, and we have a good number of them now being exposed to serve as role models. And even in the military, We are the country with the only general that is a woman within the sub-region, and these are examples of giving opportunities to women to take leadership roles. And I think we are succeeding in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. President Banda?
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. More than 50% of the women, of the people of Malawi are women. And I'm also informed that those more than 50% gave birth to the rest. When we empower women, we empower a nation. When we look at Africa, we look at the population growth. When you look at, you find a woman with more than 10 children, and you tell this woman, don't you think this is enough? She'll look back at you and say, you have wealth, I have children. So until and unless we deal with the issue of income, children will continue to be born. When you go in hospitals, when I fight maternal mortality, when I go in hospitals, the women that are dying giving birth are between the ages of 15 to 19. The reason why they are dying is because they are not going to secondary school because they can't afford the $50. So the community then encourages them to get married. And until we sort out the issue of income at household level, these girls are going to continue to die. Because they're staying 4 more years in secondary school is not only about her future, but also her life, the health of the woman. Therefore, it is imperative, it is very important for us to sort out the issue of income at household level, particularly for the poor. So education for the women. Number 2, their participation in leadership. We have already demonstrated in Africa, and I want to thank all African men for creating space for women of Africa to participate in leadership at this level. I say this because there are some parts of this world that are still struggling to get a woman into State House. So it's a fact. But in Africa, we have 2 women presidents, but we have also got the head of the African Union, a woman. So it is our time as African women to seize this opportunity, to get as many women as possible into leadership. The third is education for the girl child. Our girls must go to school. And our girls must go to school and must stay in school. The fourth is income for the women. The women must have an income, because when the household at grassroots level has an income, the girls will go to school, the girls will go to hospital. The status of the family, we shall automatically improve. As far as the youth are concerned, in Malawi, what we are doing is at grassroots, for those that missed out on education, we are mobilizing women and youth and supporting them and helping them to grow crops that have export potential so that they can have an income. So we have mobilized the youth and women and provided them with farms to grow crops. And the good news is that this year, we are heading for a bumper harvest. But I also think it is very, very important for the youth to participate in leadership. And I want to agree with President Koroma that the youth are not leaders of tomorrow. The youth are leaders of today. We postpone their participation in leadership by telling them they are leaders of tomorrow. So perhaps allow me to introduce my Minister of Trade. I want to introduce my Minister of Trade. Thank you. I don't need to say more. I rest my case.
running short on time, and if I could, I'm going to ask President Macky Sall to say a few short words on women and youth.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. It's quite difficult to say anything more after all these presentations, to say something that hasn't been said yet, but I'll just say that African society is a very young society. Africa is a young continent. The Prime Minister said so. In Senegal, as in most other countries, 70% of the population is under 25. So just imagine, 70% are under 25. So the challenge to our governments, these are major challenges. First of all, education, which remains the cross-cutting issue, be it for women or for young people. There's a proverb that says that if you train a man, you train a citizen. If you train a woman, you train a society. Because a trained and educated woman has an entire family, entire children benefit from her status. And this is geometrical, and this means that everybody in society will be educated and trained. So we must absolutely carry out these educational training efforts, empowerment efforts towards women, but also we must promote youth, because if the youth is not taken into account, it will take its own affairs into its own hand by the street. So we absolutely need well-educated, well-trained people training the youth. It doesn't just mean having universities. Yes, that's fundamental. Today we have 6 universities, and we've created a brand new university, which is in the center of the country. But above all, we must provide vocational training for jobs, for skills, which means that people who do manual labor should be just as respected as people who conduct intellectual work. And in Africa, we have suffered very much from that. We follow the French tradition. Since independence, we've always considered that people who conduct manual labor are in fact at the bottom of the scale, which means that everybody wanted to become lawyers or doctors, engineers, but a society cannot continue according to that model. No, we need manual workers, we need bakers, we need masons, we need everybody, need of everything to create a society. And we need to give value to that in order to give more jobs, more possibilities to the youth, to ensure that the most productive sectors of the continent, namely agriculture and modernized agriculture, should be able to occupy most of our workforce. And finally, with respect to women, we have a law on gender equality which has been enforced for the elections, which means a person who does not apply the principle of parity, if you're a candidate, you cannot be elected. And this is being enforced today. We see it in Parliament. We see it for the upcoming elections at the city and local election. And this is a principle that will be applied thanks to a commission, which means there have been some progress that have been made in Africa. Well, of course, Africa, it's also the continent where we still have official polygamy. Yes, we must acknowledge the status, the situation of our societies. But this has to be a dynamic, a momentum, a thrust. Polygamy, you see it in other societies. It's not just in Africa. We accept it and we assume. I'm not a polygamist, rest assured. I have but one wife. I just want to say that you shouldn't get the wrong target. Women's empowerment, it's just not equality of laws, but it's the living conditions of women in rural environments, the hardship of work, delivery, giving birth, as you said, Madam President. That is what the government must take into account. We have to educate them. We have to give electricity in the villages. We must have wells, healthcare centers to take care of prenatal care, to allow rural women to give birth under better conditions, to ensure that the hardship of their labor be reduced, and they become true citizens of the world. So I wouldn't want to see the evolution of women exclusively for intellectuals and in urban centers. Yes, that's important, but we must also ensure that rural women have a better living conditions. Thank you very much.
We have many, many more questions from the audience that we will not be able to take this morning. But this has been a very stimulating and delightful dialogue with four great African leaders. We all here in the United States are proud of them being in Washington with us over the last several days. And we are especially proud that they are, in fact, share the values and principles that we in the United States believe in. Our strong democratic institutions, our respect and deep respect for human rights and civil liberties, our commitment to economic growth and prosperity, and a respect and understanding of the importance of women and youth and inclusivity in our democracy, as well as the importance of a strong civil society. But we're extraordinarily pleased to have been able to host this event with President Macky Sall, President Banda, President Koroma, and Prime Minister Neves from Cape Verde. I hope that you have all in the audience found this program to be as stimulating and rewarding as I have. So I thank them all, and I turn the podium back over to the President of the United States Institute for Peace, Jim Marshall, and we thank him personally, and we thank his colleagues for, again, opening up their facilities for this wonderful event.
Well, Ambassador Carson and all of our guests, I was inspired by your remarks. Leadership like yours clearly bodes well for the future of Africa. You set an example for the world, and it's an example of hope, and it's an example that is inspiring. So thank you all for coming. It was a delight to host you. I would ask that the audience remain seated while we have our guests and their entourages leave. So please be seated, and with that, we'll close the event with my thanks and the thanks of the institute.